Hello and welcome to Extraordinary Women TV with Shannon Skinner. I've got a great show lined up for you today. In the first half hour, you're going to meet eco-journalist Emily Hunter. And later in the segment, before we take a break, I'll have my regular Good to Know Minute when I ask my guests for their top tip on creating a successful life. You'll hear Emily's. In the second half of the show, we're going to be talking about how to be eco-sexy. So stay tuned. Emily Hunter is a journalist and an environmental activist. She has sailed on the high seas to save whales. She has been held hostage, and she's actually also protested for climate change issues, and quite an adventure at the age of 26. So, Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, no, it's really a pleasure. Now, of course, you come from a family of great adventurers.
I certainly do. I come from a long line of activists, eco-activist parents. They were co-founders of Greenpeace and actually put themselves on the front lines to save whales, stop nuclear testing, protect seals, and protect the planet in many, many ways. My father was the first president of Greenpeace. My mother was the first woman to save a whale.
So that's Robert Hunter was your father,
yes.
And Bobby Hunter, your mom.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, she was quite instrumental. Let's talk about her because she's got an interesting story. She was quite instrumental in co-founding Greenpeace.
Absolutely. I feel like my mother's story, is many eco-warrioresses, female eco-activist stories haven't really been shared so much. A lot of people know my father being the first president of Greenpeace and being a City TV eco-reporter. They don't really know Bobby Hunter. And Bobby Hunter was not only a co-founder of Greenpeace, but she was the first treasurer of Greenpeace. So she was the first woman, first of anybody actually, to get the funding for the first couple of ships. Without her, those first initial campaigns wouldn't have happened because she found that money for it. And as I said, she was also the first woman to save a whale by putting herself in front of a harpoon. So she played a hugely instrumental role.
And of course, Greenpeace has grown to be quite a large, well-known organization around the world.
Yeah, no, it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest. It's a multi-issue, environmental issue organization that now has offices around the world, speaking different languages, being appropriate for different cultures, and it's doing a phenomenal job. It's not just now fighting for whales, it's also fighting on climate change issues, rainforest issues. I mean, you name it, Greenpeace is now there.
Now, what was it like to grow up in a family of, such activists, being out in the high seas, and what was it like for you?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I think it was a lot more ordinary than people expect. I went to school, I lived in suburbia, all these types of things. But, I mean, it was ordinary, and then, of course, there was kind of the extraordinary. I mean, I loved kind of skipping classes and going to my dad because I was getting more of an education with him. He would go off sometimes and do his campaigns. It was like he was this soldier for the planet going off into battle for the planet. And he'd go out in the high seas and help protect different animals and protect the oceans. We'd have camera crews, come into the wee hours of our house because they're filming the show Paper Cuts. And so we had, kind of this extraordinary life on the side, but then very ordinary too, and very ordinary upbringing as well.
Who was the biggest influence for you in your life, if you could choose one person?
It'd have to be my dad. I know that's kind of corny, but it would have to be him. He really was a person with such vision and commitment to his vision. He didn't compromise his dreams, and he was somebody that always went after them. And despite any kind of odds or challenges or even detractors of other individuals, he kept going for what his vision was, and it was to create a global environmental organization and create a global movement. And I think he was one of those originals that have really helped realize what we have today, which is a global movement.
So, your father since passed away, but your mother must be absolutely proud of you and your accomplishments to date.
That's what she tells me, yeah. No, she is really an amazing mother, and she's been so supportive of me all these years now. Ever since my dad passed away, I mean, my own sense of activism has just grown so much more. I feel responsibility as a next generation to be somewhat of a voice and create that movement and build that movement that we have today. And my mother's just been right there by my side, helping me along the way, emotionally, financially sometimes, you name it. She's just always been there by my side, and it's really great to have that.
What's it like to be a woman activist?
It has its challenges, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
For one, I feel like our voices and our representation are our faces really aren't being shared and exposed in the media a lot of the time. I mean, when you think of the environmental movement, you think of white middle-class men. To be honest, outside of David Suzuki, you think of white middle-class men. And this next generation, you're still kind of getting white middle-class men from people like Leonardo DiCaprio is a bit of an environmental celebrity. You don't really see the women's stories, and that's still something I find a challenge today, is to have the female representation and voice heard. I also think we're not considered as strong for some reason. That still goes on. Either you're not as strong in the front lines, there's the big burly guys at the front lines, or you're not as strong as an organizer or this or that, And I just think that's really a big fallacy in the movement, because women have played such a vital role in it, from Rachel Carson, who wrote the book Silent Spring and sparked the modern day environmental movement, to people like my mother, to young eco-warriors today that are really the heart and soul and are leading the charge in this movement. And their story should be shared.
What is it within you that really is driving you, that's really propelling you to go out there and really fight for animal rights, fight for the environment, for the planet? I mean, what is it within you that...
Yeah, I guess I would have to say, this is going to sound cheesy, but love. I would say it's love. I have a lot of love for this world and for people. I see the good in people, and I want us to survive. But the way we're living, the excess we're living, and the way we're polluting and destroying, the massive levels of destruction, and I've seen it with my own two eyes, that I know we're just going to the very edge of a cliff, and we're pushing ourselves to that edge. And with climate change advancing, I'm not sure if we're going to survive this next 100 years. I mean, that sounds very doom and gloom, but quite honestly, the science is even showing that. And I want us to survive. I think we're an incredible species. And I think this planet is incredible, and it deserves a chance. And I think we have it in us to make the switch for a more positive future for ourselves, and be the better human beings that we can be, and touch base with our humanity again, So I guess it's just that I want better for ourselves, because I feel like we deserve it, and I have a sense of love for humanity.
Now, you've been out on the high seas. You've been out on the Sea Shepherd, well-known ship, used in protesting and activism.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It's an adventure. I've been on a couple campaigns now. We went to the Antarctic. We were on the high seas, the most dangerous seas in the world, and I get pretty seasick, so that was an adventure in itself, just trying to stay healthy. Sometimes it was like you were in a volatile roller coaster that never would stop, and you couldn't get off the roller coaster ride.
So how old were you?
I started sailing at 19, and I've done it for about 5 years. I've done 4 campaigns. My first time was when I was actually taken hostage on one campaign.
Okay, do tell.
Yeah, so I was in the Galapagos Islands, and basically fishermen wanted full exploitation of these things called the sea cucumbers on the islands. And there was already been mass exploitation by fishermen on the islands. So we went out there to try to lay a front line and try to stop them. We were at a government building, but instead of us holding that front line, they told us to get inside the building. We did. They told us that we were hostages and we couldn't leave. So we were actually kept there for a full night, and we were with other researchers and people that were in the building that couldn't leave. Nothing was violent or anything like that. They weren't trying to harm us, but they were kind of holding us captive.
Making a point?
Yeah, making a point. And and then we were released, but and unfortunately that particular campaign we weren't successful, and we didn't get to stop them from having full exploitation. The president of that country allowed them full exploitation. But you have to keep fighting. You never know when your fights are going to actually win or not. But it was an adventure. But I did survive totally fine.
Well, have you ever been afraid?
I mean, yeah, I think for anybody who says they've never been afraid during the kind of stuff we do, it's probably lying. I certainly have been afraid at some points when we've done rammings at sea like Sea Shepherd does, and our whole boat felt like it was about to be capsized. I mean, certainly it felt pretty scary, but I think when you know what you're fighting for and you have a purpose for what you're doing in your work, I mean, you're willing to take those risks for something bigger than yourself, and I certainly am.
So how is it that you get beyond the fear?
Well, I think you just kind of feel the fear, but you try to not let it cripple you. You try to not have it take control of you, and just stay focused on what you're fighting for. And because it is bigger than me, it has to do with my home, my planet. It has to do with protecting life itself. And that's something, as I say, I'm willing to take those risks.
Now, it's time for a break, and this means it's my Good to Know Minute.
Yeah.
And Emily, I know you've got a great tip for my audience.
Yeah, well, I think my Good to Know Minute would have to be limitless in your approach in life, and to never let any person, bureaucracy, government, or anything stand in the way of your dreams and your goals. To always build upon what those dreams are, because you never know, those dreams might just be realized, but don't let anything limit you.
Well, thank you so much. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, more with eco-journalist Emily Hunter. Welcome back to Extraordinary Women TV with Shannon Skinner, and I'm joined by eco-journalist Emily Hunter. It's really such a pleasure having you here. Now, you have a new book out.
I do. Yeah, it's called The Next Eco Warriors, and it's a collection of short stories by 22 young women and men who are saving the planet. They basically are a collection of stories that show this new movement, a movement that is global, inclusive, and using new tools to make their change.
So, in terms of a new movement, what do you mean by like a new movement?
A new movement in the sense that, well, the 60s, 70s movement, it was great, and it did great accomplishments, but it kind of faded away, and the movement was kind of lost around the 80s and 90s. Now, a new social movement is growing again in the 21st century. And this new movement is led by a new generation of young people from around the world, and they're using a whole new variety of tactics and strategies to make their change. It's not really the old lobbying, petition signing, even hanging out your banner that's really going to make the change anymore. It's using new tools and new skills, like the internet, for example, to make a difference.
How are you finding social media for activism?
Oh, it's such a vital part in the 21st century. I mean, not just environmental justice fights, but social justice fights. We can look to Egypt and the Middle East. We can look to Wisconsin union rallies. I mean, all around the world, social media is playing a huge role in exposing truth and galvanizing and connecting people and really building a movement and getting them then out on the streets.
Now, your book, Eco Warrior, how'd you get the name Eco Warrior? Where does this come from?
Well, this is actually a term that my father coined, and I say that truly because he actually wrote a book called The Warriors of the Rainbow, and it was based off Warriors of the Rainbow Cree mythology. He actually named the first boat in Greenpeace the Rainbow Warrior, and he coined eco-activist, eco-warriors, so the environmental crusaders, the ones battling for the planet. And so I say it's the next generation of eco-warriors.
Can you give me some examples of the eco-warriors that are in your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's people such as Subhashini Raj, and she's a woman who actually faced a tsunami herself, much like what was happening in Japan right now, recently. And she's been part of an organization called 350.org, because after the tsunami, she realized she didn't want to face another huge disaster coming, and that was climate change. That was going to bring rising sea levels to her island and wash away her island on Fiji. So she became part of this group called 350.org, this global climate movement that uses the internet, uses social networking to connect people from all around the world to build global days of actions happening on one day of the year. And last October 10th, they actually had the most widespread day of any kind of political action, not even just environmental action, political action in history, with having an event in 188 countries. That's just 4 countries shy of the whole world. So that kind of shows this ability using the internet and social networking to truly build a global climate movement. Then there's also people such as, I would say, Alana Beltran, who is a performance artist and used her ability in creating this symbol of an angel and using herself as the angel by putting herself up on top of the canopies of this old-growth forest that's being hacked away in Tasmania, Australia. And becoming this symbol and having these photos taken of her, it shined a light across the whole world because everyone loved these photos of her. And it went into Elle magazine, it went across the world, and has now helped putting protection laws to protect the forest. So she's using her performance ability in art to shine a light in a new way. It includes people like Elizabeth Redmond, who used a little bit of science, a little bit of innovation, and created a new renewable energy in a flooring system that you just walk on and actually creates power. So we're using our feet to power, essentially. And she's now become quite business savvy and created her own business selling this product in Power Leap. So it's just amazing all the different abilities we're using to create change in a variety of ways.
And you've also, I've noticed that the founder of Earth Hours in the book as well. Is it Andy Ridley?
Yes, we got the founder of Earth Hour,
Right.
Andy Ridley from Australia.
Yeah.
He writes of the founding of Earth Hour from 2007 when it was really just in Sydney, Australia, to now being this hugely global phenomenon that now has the largest participants in any eco event. They have 1.3 billion people in 2010 taking part in Earth Hour.
Wow.
It's over 1/6 the Earth's population. So it's incredible how huge this movement has really become.
You know, there's many people who, don't really get that involved, or they want to participate in some sort of environmental issue, but they often think, well, I'm only one person, so how can I make a difference? But there's a perfect example of one person who had an idea.
Yeah. No, that's the thing. It's like there's 22 people in here, and they're all just one person. And beyond the book, there was hundreds. There's already, like, I'm not lying to you, thousands, even millions of people out there that are just one person making a difference in all kinds of ways, whether it be guerrilla gardening, whether it be using their skills in the internet, using their skills in a business savvy way, and having a bit of innovation and ideas, using art, using writing, whatever your skills are, just using your abilities to make change. And that's this new movement, what it's doing to make change in new ways, and why I think it's so much more accessible for a lot of us today.
And there's also the young founder who's, I think, 13, Plant for the Planet.
Yeah, this is an individual outside the book, but this is just an example of many incredible people all around the world that aren't necessarily part of the next Eco Warriors.
Also, he's actually not part of the book,
but he's an example of one of the youngest Eco Warriors out there. He's 13 years old, Felix Finkbeiner from Germany. He co-founded a group called Plant for the Planet that has already planted 3.5 million trees worldwide in just 2 years, and they're planning to plant 1 billion in 10 years. And I think they're going to do it. And the idea is, if adults aren't going to change the world, kids are going to change it. We're going to make the change ourselves. And he's a perfect example of it.
So what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I really felt like these stories weren't being shared. This was just an incredible, incredible story of our times that the media was not picking up on. I feel like the media kind of, in many ways, kind of botched the climate change story, and they're kind of botching this story, in my opinion. They're not really getting it. We hear of small events like a protest here, an Earth Hour event here, but we don't really get the whole picture that there is this rising environmental movement that connects social justice, connects all of us, that's exciting, that's a good news story. You know, we always hear the bad news story, but there actually is something positive going on too that we're not getting to hear about. And I think if people knew about this, they would realize not only is there a movement they could be a part of, but there's something to maybe have hope over right now in a world that seems to have very little hope these days. So I wanted that story to be shared. I wanted the story of a new movement to be shared, the story of incredible individuals to be shared, the story of some hope to be shared.
So if we talk about storytelling then specifically, I mean, what does storytelling have to do with activism?
I mean, I think it's a huge part because storytelling has been throughout the ages. I mean, I studied archaeology, and I mean, since the caveman days, since, you name it, digging out and doing any kind of excavation, we can always find there's a link to storytelling. Throughout the ages, we've connected to it, and we've had it either in movie forms, in books, in folk telling, you name it. But it's always been a vital part to us as humans because that's how we share visions of a better future for ourselves. That's how we connect to even remembering our past. And so for activism, I feel like it's very much the X factor to social change in many ways. I think it allows us, as I say, to kind of envision a better world for ourselves than what is just the status quo right now. So for me, I want to share these stories to envision a better world for ourselves, to envision the eco-warrior inside, and to envision a growing movement that we could be a part of.
And so where can people get a copy of your book?
They can get a copy at any major bookstore, on Amazon, or they can support the authors by getting a copy on our website at www.nextecowarriors.com.
Now I have to ask you, what has been your proudest moment so far? I mean, you're 26, you've lived quite a lot of life at the age of 26. Proudest moment?
You know, it's interesting. I feel like as activists we don't take enough time to really appreciate what we've done. For me, one of the most tangible things I would say outside of the documentaries and the book and the different campaigns was I was actually helping to save a whale that was beached a couple of years back. And I think just to do something so hands-on sometimes just really shows you the value and reward of making a difference in the world. I was able to save a whale she was beached for 3 days straight, and at the very last minute we didn't think we were going to get her out there, and she was a young teenage female whale, pilot whale. And on the very last day and the very last hour, when we were about to give up, we gave it one last haul, and we got her back in the water, and we got her back to her pod. And to me, she's a symbol. Like, just keep fighting, because that could be that very last second you could just save the world.
Well, that's incredible. And where was that?
That was in Australia.
Yeah. Wow. Now, what can Canadians do to become their own eco-warrior?
Yeah. I would have to say that I think, we've had a time where we've become very conscious of the environment, especially since Al Gore's film and being aware of climate change. And we've done the nice steps of changing our lifestyles and use less plastic bags, we recycle, we drive our hybrids. That's all been good. But I think it's now time, it's now 2011, we need to take the next step. We need to not be just green-minded, green consumers, but green actionists and get ourselves involved. And that doesn't mean you necessarily need to be at the front lines, doesn't need to mean you need to be a protester out there yelling, or join a Sea Shepherd ship and go ram other whaling ships. But it does mean getting involved in some substantial way and trying to make some kind of big change with whatever abilities you have. So I think just find out what issues you're passionate about, get out there, get involved. There's tons of action days happening around the world. You can take part in 350.org protests that are peaceful. You can take part of more direct action stuff. There's so much going on around the world. They can learn more at my website how to get involved. But just get out there, get involved, and try to do something big.
So your website is nextecowarriors.com?
Yes.
And your blog is ecohuntress.wordpress.com.
Yes.
So there's two places where people can find out more about you.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you working on now?
Well, after the book, I'm now looking into kind of helping out with some organizations, some next-gen youth groups. There's one that's a marine conservation group that's going to be doing some direct action this summer. There's hoping to get involved with 350.org. And basically just keep fighting, because there's no short of a lot of work to do. So I'm going to just keep trucking along.
And your documentaries?
Yep,
where can people watch your documentaries?
Yeah, people can look at YouTube or on my site at emilyhunter.ca, and there's the YouTube videos of my 3 documentaries that I've done over the years with MTV Canada. I'm probably doing some more, kind of exposing the issues and exposing the eco-activist fight.
Well, good for you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So again, for a copy of Emily Hunter's book, you can actually visit her website for more information at nextecowarriors.com. Inspiring woman, so thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. Unfortunately, our time is up, and I'm often surprised at how quickly it goes by, but really grateful to have had you here in the studio today, and best of luck with everything that you do.
Thank you.